So welcome everyone to Our Amazing Desert, or the presentation of Our Amazing Desert. My name is Colin Barrows with Friends of the Desert Mountains, and Elizabeth, I think, is going to introduce herself. So take it away, Elizabeth.
Welcome everyone. My name is Elizabeth Ogren Erickson. I am a certified California naturalist, an outreach liaison volunteer, and a board member with Friends of the Desert Mountains. Friends is an environmental nonprofit that has been acquiring and conserving land in the Coachella Valley since 1987, so for over 30 years. And we are the official support organization of the Santa Rosa and San Jacinto Mountains National Monument. Now, I know that many people begin a presentation with a joke. However, I'm not funny. Plus, I'm originally from Wisconsin, and so all I know are cow jokes. So instead, I promise to be passionate, and I'm especially passionate about our amazing desert and Friends of the Desert Mountains. Our presentation today is titled, Our Amazing Desert, the Diversity of Life. Did you know that those of us who live in the Coachella Valley live in one of the most biologically diverse areas of the entire world? And yet, what accounts for that biodiversity? Our presentation will provide insight to answer that question, and will share information about Friends of the Desert Mountains. The presentation will take 30 minutes, and you are welcome to use your chat box to enter questions. And then at the end of the presentation, Colin Barrows, who is a biologist, will answer your questions, and I will be there to answer them also. First, let's set the stage. I love this satellite image. It's a great depiction of why we are where we are and what makes this place so special. Down the center of this image is a wall of mountains that extends 1,276 miles all the way from the Sierra Nevadas down to Baja California. And these mountains have a very dramatic effect. They prevent rains off the Pacific Ocean from reaching the Coachella Valley. Land to the west of the mountains is green with large expanses of gray concrete. Do you think that the concrete is visible from space? Give me a thumbs up if it's yes, thumbs down if it's no, and shrug your shoulders if you don't know. Yes, astronauts can see the 16 lanes of the 15 approaching San Diego. Back to the satellite image. Land to the east of the mountains is a cornucopia of beiges. To quote Colin Barrows, there is a perception that some people may have of the desert as a dry and desolate place as compared to the green on the coast. In many ways, though, the desert is a place full of life and lushness and greenery. You have to get to know the desert first before it reveals itself to you. End of quote. And you may be surprised to learn that there's a lot of diversity, by that I mean variety, in those beiges, which is an important reason for protecting natural lands in the Coachella Valley. Why is the diversity of land important? It is important because different plants and different animals are specific to different natural lands. If you take a map of North America and plot out where all the various species of plants and animals are located, you find a huge orange biodiversity hotspot over the Coachella Valley, where we have plants and animals that are found only in the Coachella Valley and no place else in the world. In comparison, if we go into forests, for instance, along the East Coast of the United States, or Wisconsin, where I'm from, or up into Canada, you find large numbers of the same species. For instance, large numbers of sugar maples, or large numbers of white-tailed deer that are found all over North America. However, if you come to the Coachella Valley, you find large numbers of diverse, in other words, different species that are found only in the Coachella Valley and no place else on Earth, including the federally endangered peninsular bighorn sheep. This biological diversity is partially due to the elevational diversity of the Coachella Valley. Amazingly, and this is something that's truly amazing, All 5 life zones are present in the Coachella Valley. You may wonder, well, why is that important? It's important because different plants grow at different elevations depending on factors such as precipitation or sunlight or temperature. For example, does a plant grow at an elevation that receives 4 inches of annual precipitation a year? And yes, I spoke correctly, 4 inches a year. Or does it receive 10 times as much precipitation a year? How intense are the ultraviolet sun rays? Is there any cloud cover to block the intensity of the UV rays? What type of temperature does a plant have to survive? Does it have to survive freezing temperatures? Does it have to survive temperatures that approach 130 degrees Fahrenheit on the desert floor in the summertime? Or does it have to survive both? And different animals feed on different plants at different elevations. Right now, we are in the first life zone, the lower Sonoran Desert, elevation from below sea level to 2,000 feet above sea level. It is home to the desert ecosystem, including the federally threatened Coachella Valley milkvetch and the California endangered Coachella Valley fringe-toed lizard, both of which are endemic to, in other words, found only in the Coachella Valley and no place else in the world. No place else in California, no place else in North America, no place else in the world. Now, I'm sure that there's someone in the audience who would love to know the scientific name of the lizard. Lizards happen to have 2 names, like we do. The first name is the genus, the second name is the species. The lizard's first name is Uma, which is very easy for us to remember. We think of the actress Uma Thurman. The lizard's second name is Inornata, I-N-O-R-N-A-T-A, Uma Inornata. So the next time that you are appearing on that game show virtually, you will be the lucky winner because you know the answer to that question. Continuing up in elevation, the second life zone is the upper Sonoran Desert, elevation 2,000 to 4,000 feet above sea level. This is where we find the native California fan palm, the only palm native to the Western United States. All of the other palms, date palms, queen palms, royal palms, were imported from someplace else in the world once upon a time. The third life zone is a transitional zone. This is where we find pinyon pine and juniper woodlands, along with agave, which was an important food source for the Native American Cahuilla. For those of you who have visited Cahuilla-Tewanet Vista Point on Highway 74, that actually is in the transitional zone. And for those of you who have yet to visit, it will be worth every minute and every mile you take to drive there. The views are beautiful, and the interpretive signage that was designed by Tracy Albrecht, who is an interpretive specialist with the BLM, that signage is excellent. The fourth life zone is the boreal zone of yellow pines and other coniferous forests. And way up at the top, above the clouds, is the fifth life zone, the alpine zone, which is a very harsh environment, and yet plants such as lupin and animals such as the southern sagebrush lizard and the violet-green swallow manage to survive. Next, let's look at the boundary of the Coachella Valley and the important natural lands that lie within the Coachella Valley, including the southern border of Joshua Tree National Park, Salton Sea State Recreation Area, which is an important flyway for over 450 species of migratory birds, Santa Rosa and San Jacinto Mountains National Monument, for which Friends of the Desert Mountains is the official support organization. Our national monument is a landscape monument consisting of over 280,000 acres of land that is preserved and protected into perpetuity. The national monument was created in the year 2000 by an act of Congress, and it stretches all the way from Mount San Jacinto at 10,834 feet above sea level to the western shore of the Salton Sea at 236 feet below sea level. Our national monument is important because of its elevational diversity and also because of what it protects, including the federally endangered peninsular bighorn sheep and the federally threatened desert tortoise. Next is our newest national monument, Sand to Snow National Monument, which creates an important corridor and habitat for species movement from the Santa Rosa Mountains south of the 10 to the San Bernardino Mountains north of the 10. Did you know that there's a wildlife corridor underneath the 10? It is in the area of the Snow Creek Road exit. It is where the Pacific Crest Trail goes underneath the 10. Next, Coachella Valley Preserve, where pristine native sand dunes still remain in the Coachella Valley. Mecca Hills Wilderness, where the San Andreas Fault is located. Oracopia Mountains Wilderness, where the astronauts trained for the lunar landing. Santa Rosa Wilderness, which is home to the largest concentration of peninsular bighorn sheep in the United States. And Mount San Jacinto State Park, where the top of the tram is located. Did you know that the northeast escarpment of Mount San Jacinto, and escarpment is a steep slope, is actually the steepest rise in the United States? Together, these important natural lands form the Coachella Valley Multiple Species Habitat Conservation Plan, which is a nationally recognized conservation planning model for protecting species and developing land sustainably. Extensive research was done to determine areas of critical habitat, in other words, parcels of land where threatened or endangered plants and animals required protection, and areas where homes and businesses could be built sustainably, and areas that did not require protection. In 1996, the Coachella Valley Association of Governments was formed. As a result, the Coachella Valley has a funding framework in place to acquire lands and conserve them and protect them into perpetuity. Back in 1996, CVAG set a 100-year goal to conserve 240,000 acres of land in the Coachella Valley. We're going to be scrolling through a series of slides in 5-year increments. The parcels of land in bright red are private land of critical habitat to acquire and conserve. And the parcels in bright green, this is dark green, you'll see the bright green on the next screen. Parcels in bright green are parcels that have been conserved. And as you can see, in 1996, we had a few parcels of land that were conserved. 2001, 2006, 2011, 2016. Look at the progress that we have made. To date, over 95,000 acres of land have been conserved, and of that, over 60,000 of those acres have been acquired by Friends of the Desert Mountains. If you take CVAG's original 100-year goal to conserve 240,000 acres of land, you subtract off the 95,000 acres that have been conserved, that leaves fewer than 145,000 acres to conserve in the future. And we are on target to meet our 100-year goal. Next, I'd like to share information about Friends of the Desert Mountains. At the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that Friends began as a land acquisition organization. Our mission is now fourfold: land acquisition, conservation, education, and research. Let's set the stage for this segment. Did you know that the Coachella Valley is the #1 hiking destination in the United States? We have over 500 miles of hiking trails. And these hiking trails are an important part. You may think of it as the heart of this wildland-urban interface. We live in this amazing place, and people want to experience it. Those of us who live here and those who come to visit. Some people prefer to hike our trails for exercise. They want to get from point A to point B as quickly as they possibly can. Other people prefer interpretive hikes and being in the moment. They see that little beetle on the ground, take a picture with their smartphone so that later they can identify the beetle on iNaturalist and learn more about the beetle. So these two dynamics create challenges for conservationists. As a result, Friends of the Desert Mountains has taken it upon ourselves to make sure that these trails are safe, sustainable, and well-maintained through our stewardship efforts, the second component of our mission. Do you know what the number one fear that people have when they are out hiking? Usually my audiences are all saying, rattlers! Or, is it the fear of getting poked by something sharp like a cholla spine? Or is it the fear of getting lost? It's actually the fear of getting lost. So how do we create safe hiking trails? Our stewardship efforts include our trail maintenance programs. If you see our trail stewards out on the trails, please thank them for the work that they do. They are our hardest working group of volunteers. They install new signage on trails to encourage people to hike on designated trails for two important reasons. First of all, that sand is actually granitic rock. It's our desert soil. It supports living, breathing organisms like plants and the animals and the people who feed on the plants. When people hike or especially drive vehicles off trails, it's extremely damaging to our desert soil and the lizards that live just under the surface of the soil and the plants that grow in the soil. It takes years, actually decades, more than 30 years for the soil to repair itself. The second important reason for hiking on a designated trail is for your safety. If you are out hiking and you are accidentally injured, the first place that search and rescue teams are going to look for you is on a designated trail. And it's usually easier to rescue you on trail than it is off trail. So please hike on designated trails. Our trail stewards also install steps on areas of steep inclines and declines, and they grade areas of erosion. Our weed warrior volunteers remove non-native invasive species, such as bull thistle, from this meadow in Garner Valley. Now that the bull thistle is removed, the native grasses and wildflowers are growing again in this beautiful valley. Our volunteers and staff participate in National Public Lands Day to remove trash and non-native invasive species, such as Saharan mustard and fountain grass, which is a very prolific cedar. This is a project from a few years ago, the Top of the Cove Trails in La Quinta. We worked together with U.S. Forest Service and BLM employees, La Quinta officials, La Quinta residents, high school students, and grade school students. Together, we removed 150 bags, the big 65-gallon bags of non-native plants and trash in less than 4 hours. So please join us in the fall for National Public Lands Day. To learn more about our stewardship efforts, please go online to desertmountains.org and check out our stewardship efforts. The third component of Friends' mission is education, including outreach programs such as this. So thank you for joining us virtually for our Zoom meeting today. In a typical season, our interpretive hike leaders lead educational hikes on trails in the National Monument. I am a National Association for Interpretation Certified Interpretive Guide. I lead the Ed Hasty Walk, which is a totally accessible 0.2 of a mile paved trail around the visitor center at the National Monument off of Highway 74. I talk about the amazing adaptations that the plants have made to survive in the lower Sonoran Desert and other fun facts. And we're certainly hoping that the interpretive hikes will resume next season. So please check that out online also. This image was taken in October of 2019. This is the West Covina High School Geo Club, who joined us for a lecture on our amazing desert and an interpretive hike into Carrizo Canyon. And fortunately, we saw peninsular bighorn sheep, so they were very excited about that. Our education director, Jennifer Prado, and volunteers lead an education program to teach children in the East Coachella Valley about the desert and the critters. Our youth education volunteers also teach youth about safe hiking practices, including the use of compasses, maps, and signal mirrors, as they're learning how to do in this image, so that if our youth are out hiking and someone is injured and their cell phone is out of range or has gone to cell phone heaven, they know how to signal for help and get back safely. We want our youth, who are our future, to be excited about being outdoors. Important word, outdoors in nature. And Friends has an amazing education program for our own volunteers. We are educated on topics such as plants and animals, biodiversity, the Kauai, climate, the geology, history of the Coachella Valley, iNaturalist, which is what we're learning to do right here, life zones, the Salton Sea, sand dunes, water, CPR and first aid, safe practices, and the best ever volunteer-only training hikes. To learn more about that and complete a volunteer opportunities application online, please visit us at desertmountains.org/volunteer. We would love to have you join us as a volunteer. The fourth component of Friends' mission is research. Our volunteers participate in community science research projects under the direction of scientists, such as Dr. Cameron Barrows, who is shown in this image, and Dr. Lynn Sweet, who are research ecologists at the University of California Riverside Palm Desert Center, and Danny Ortiz, who is a wildlife biologist with the Bureau of Land Management. Community scientists are volunteer scientists. We record findings such as date, time, temperature, elevation, GPS coordinates, and monthly findings on plants and animals in order to better document the biology and the botany of the Coachella Valley. In 2016, our Friends volunteers began a community science project under the direction of a 30-year community science project under the direction of Dr. Barrows to study the effects of people and climate on the plants and animals in the National Monument. Dr. Barrows' research shows that there are plants that are dying in the National Monument, which means that the animals, beetles, lizards, peninsular bighorn sheep that feed on those plants may die also. Or does it mean that that plant is growing at a higher elevation and the animal is migrating to a higher elevation to feed on that plant? What happens when we get to an elevation where it freezes? These are the types of questions that our community science project seeks to answer. This is a community science project from a few years ago. Danny Ortiz and our volunteers studied the western yellow bat. There was very little known about this bat until this study was done. As a matter of fact, we didn't even know where this bat lived. And I'm sure you would like to know what we discovered. So we found that the western yellow bat lives only in the skirts. Those are the brown fronds that hang down on the native California fan palms. So there is an important reason for retaining the brown fronds on some of the native California fan palms. And currently, Danny Ortiz and our community science volunteers are doing research on the federally threatened desert tortoise in the National Monument. If you are interested in joining us as a community science volunteer, please enter your name, phone number, and email address in the chat box, and Colin Barrows will be sure to contact you. Where are we now in the history of conservation in the Coachella Valley? We are at a point in time that's challenging and also exciting. We are very privileged to live in this amazingly biodiverse place. Did you know that people have lived in the Coachella Valley for a long time? And as stewards of the land, the Kuya protected the land and the plants and the animals. Now it is all of our responsibilities to make sure that these important natural lands and the unique species of plants and animals are here for our generation to enjoy and also for future generations to enjoy. That only happens through hard work and perseverance. Friends has worked to protect these natural lands for over 30 years, and we are extremely grateful for our public, private, and corporate sponsors at the National Monument. Did you know that our National Monument is actually nationally recognized? Because we have figured out a way to manage these complex land ownership areas cooperatively. Our National Monument is a unique collaboration among the United States Forest Service, the California Division of the Bureau of Land Management, California State Parks, the Agua Caliente Band of Kuya Indians, and Friends of the Desert Mountains. Friends is also grateful for the support of the City of La Quinta and Palm Desert. Our joint collaboration on our night adventure hikes, full moon hikes, and star parties has been enormously successful. And again, we hope that that will resume next season. Together, we want to impart on upcoming generations who are our future the importance of the diversity of these natural lands. This is our staff at Friends of the Desert Mountains. As we like to say, small yet mighty, who do a ginormous amount of work. We have 4 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. Together with our 140 volunteers, we support a 280,000 acre national monument. We greet 26,000 visitors a year in the visitor center. We monitor and maintain 16,700 acres of land, and we help to maintain 320 miles of hiking trails in the National Monument. In conclusion, we invite you to become a friend. Join us as a volunteer, or you can help write the next chapter in the future of the Coachella Valley's unique critters. Uma, the fringe-toed lizard, Ava, the burrowing owl, or Pablo, the peninsular bighorn sheep, by making a monthly donation to symbolically adopt a desert critter. You can view your gifts and donate securely online at desertmountains.org/critters. Again, that's desertmountains with an s.org/critters with an S. Your donations will ensure that the unique critters and wildflowers of our desert will continue to thrive and that our beautiful desert oasis prospers for all to enjoy. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you on the trails. Thank you, Colin. So Colin, do we have any great questions in our chat box?
We have one so far, and if anybody else has questions, you can ask them now, or maybe raise your hand and I can unmute people one by one. The first question is, we have some fellow Wisconsinites in the chat or in the meeting, and they would like to know where your accent is from specifically.
Oh, we're from Maple Bluff, which is right by Madison. We're a tiny little village that borders Lake Mendota.
Someone was guessing Milwaukee, I guess.
Sorry. Any others?
Well, thank you, Elizabeth.
Sure.
Again, you can feel free to, if anybody has questions, you can do like the little hand raise thing, and it should be able to see you and unmute you. Every time I see that, I mean, Elizabeth and I have worked on this presentation together for like 3 years now, and every time I see it, it gets a little better.
Thank you, Colin.
Yes, so we have a question from Sue Shiganaga, and she wants to know if there's any wildlife linkages that are needed in the Coachella Valley other than the one in Snow Creek.
So Colin, I'll let you field that one.
Okay.
Since you're a biologist, you're the best person to answer that question.
Maybe. I mean, it's actually Cindy over here who works on land acquisition does a little bit more of that, but I can answer it a little bit. So we definitely have a wildlife corridor that goes underneath the 10 that you mentioned from the San Jacinto Mountains to the San Gorgonio Mountains, where the two highest peaks in Southern California are come together like that. Um, there's also a corridor, if you go up Highway 62, there's a corridor between the Little San Bernardino Mountains, which is basically Joshua Tree National Park, and the Big San Bernardino Mountains, where Mount San Gorgonio is. So that goes underneath Highway 62. And then there's quite a few crossings along Interstate 10 as you leave Coachella and start going out towards Blythe. There are quite a few crossings out there, and that's actually called part of a conservation area called the Desert Tortoise Linkage, which connects desert tortoise habitat in Joshua Tree National Park to habitat in Anza Borrego and in the Chocolate Mountains further to the south.
So Cindy, first of all, we should introduce you. This is Cindy Barrows, and she is Colin's spouse, and she is the land acquisition assistant at Friends of the Desert Mountains. So Cindy, what do you have to add to that for us, please?
Yes, I'm the acquisition coordinator for Friends of the Desert Mountains, and I think Colin did a great job at covering most of it, but one of the main things of the Coachella Valley Multiple Species Habitat Conservation Plan is that it connects different conservation areas on both sides of the valley to other important national monuments as well as Joshua Tree. So the last one that Colin mentioned, which is Desert Tortoise and Linkage, is probably one of the largest conservation areas that we have here in the desert, and there is several linkages on the I-10 specifically to connect those two wilderness areas on the bottom to Desert Tortoise Linkage as well as Joshua Tree. And Friends actually acquired a little bit over 200 acres in that area recently as well. And it's kind of the things that our acquisition program aims to do. We aim to connect different areas by acquiring them and making sure those lands are preserved. One of the other areas that we also started to work in last year was the Santa Snow National Monument. And we've done a couple of acquisitions in that area as well. And we hope to continue doing that in the future.
So Colin, when we went to look for wildflowers last year, one of the exits that we got off was something like, was it called Cactus?
Cactus City.
Right. So and there again, there's a bridge, and we found all sorts of great wildflowers there. So is that an example of one of the areas that was created for the species movement underneath the 10?
Definitely, yeah. That's an area called Shavers Valley, and you can take the Cactus City, well, it's after the Cactus City rest stop to get the access there. It's like a little frontage road that you can go on for a little distance. And there's desert tortoise habitat there, and mule deer moving back and forth in that area, and then everything that likes to eat those things as well.
Great place for people to explore.
Okay, so I had a question about whether the heat we've been experiencing is having a negative effect on the desert wildlife. This person is also going back to Minnesota soon.
Is the ice off the lake in the town that they live in, I wonder?
Yeah, I would be more worried about the negative effect on wildlife and of the ice, I guess, but I grew up in the desert, so that's me. Yes and no. I mean, so far we haven't had any heat or weather this year, at least, that is out of the normal. So the plants and animals in the desert are adapted to this kind of temperature. They're used to it being, well, they're not used to it, but they have all, for hundreds or thousands or however long of years, have survived 120 or 130 degree temperature summers occasionally. And in fact, if it's the air temperature is 125 or 128, that means that the ground temperature is probably 140, 160, something like that. So, if you're a little side-blotched lizard this big high off the ground, you're having to deal with much higher temperatures than that. So they've all survived this long with those kinds of temperatures already. We are starting to see some effects of climate change in the Coachella Valley in terms of warming. So it is getting warmer in the summer and in the winter. And in fact, the when it comes to the changing temperatures, the temperatures or the change that we're most interested in is actually the fact that it's not that it's getting hotter in the summer, but it's getting less cold in the winter at night. And so that affects things like the snowpack, which goes down into the water table and replenishes the aquifer and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, supplies all the wildlife along the way.
Well, we're also not getting the freezing temperatures at night that would take care of knocking out some of the bugs that we would like to have knocked out, or some of the invasive species. For instance, in Wisconsin, where I'm from, the fountain grass, Pennistetum rubrum, won't survive. It doesn't survive freezing temperatures. And that's one of the concerns here, is because we don't have the freezing temperatures, is that plant is surviving, and it's a very prolific cedar. Please do not plant it in your yards, and let your HOAs know about it and make sure it's not planted in your HOA.
Okay, then I had a question from Scott about, he said, excellent presentation. So thank you, Elizabeth, again. And he wants to know if there's a link to view the presentation afterwards. So we are recording the presentation now, and we will post it on our YouTube page afterwards. And I'll send out the link to everybody who was in the presentation today.
You can also see it on Facebook.
And yeah, it's been streaming on Facebook Live as well. Let's see. Someone wants to know, I'll have a question for you, let you answer this one, Elizabeth. Someone couldn't make it to the desert this year, and they wanted to know how our spring wildflowers and weather were.
Oh my gosh. Actually, we went into this season thinking it was going to be another really, really great wildflower season like it was in 2019. We had wonderful rains up through December 26th. In the month of January, we had one morning that we woke up and our streets were wet. I looked at our weather station all excited to see how much rain we got, and it didn't even register 1/100th of an inch of rain. We went through the month of February with no rainfall at all. So then fortunately, we did get some rain in March and also in April. And having been out on trails even as recently as a week ago, Monday and Wednesday, out in the area of Coral Mountain, the plants there and in the Santa Rosa Wilderness that we took a look at were very, very happy. Beautiful leaves, large, full leaves, lots of flowers. And yet, in many cases, the flowers were smaller in size than what they were a year ago. So we ended up being very fortunate. There were lots of beautiful flowers. It was different from 2019, when we had the amazing blooms that we had in 2019. One of our board members, who has lived in the Coachella Valley for 53 years, told me last year that that was the best wildflower season that he had ever seen. And yet I thought that this year was wonderful also. Different from 2019, and yet wonderful.
Okay, so we had another question that you can answer, Elizabeth, which someone's asking about the best way for total beginners and nature lovers to learn about the beauty and science of the desert, and a follow-up question about online classes and certifications that you could recommend.
Okay, so there are a couple of things that I would definitely recommend. There is an excellent California Naturalist training program that's offered at the University of California, Riverside Palm Desert Center. It's titled Desert Sands and Sky Islands. As a matter of fact, Colin and Cindy, my spouse Bob, and I, Sue, who asked the question earlier, we're all graduates of the first class, the 2018 California Naturalist training class. I would highly recommend taking that class. Dr. Barrows, who is Colin's father, is the person who is the primary person in charge of those classes. So why don't you put that question in the chat box, again, with your name, your email address, a cell phone number, and we'll pass that information along. And then this fall, when they're starting to get things together for that program, we'll make sure that that information is passed along to you. They typically have 2 information sessions, and you're able to attend one or the other to give you information on the program to make sure it's something that you think that you would enjoy. And then the program typically starts in January. It's a 12-week program. We meet once a week on Saturdays, and we have 40 hours approximately of lectures. And we have the best ever volunteer, not volunteer, but California Naturalist training field trips. They are excellent. And we had an excellent textbook to read. We also did a capstone project, which was really interesting to do. We are able to choose our own topic, and we can research what we want to research. We are encouraged to work with one or two other people, but we can do it by ourselves. And we work with a mentor, and Dr. Barrows is our mentor. So I think that it's a program that you would really recommend. So that's something that I would recommend doing. I would also recommend learning how to use iNaturalist, and please join us as a volunteer at Friends. And then there was a second part to the question. Colin, can you repeat?
I think you covered it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I had a question about the bighorn sheep fence in La Quinta, and whether we have a position on that. And Elizabeth, you're on the board, so maybe you would have a better idea of whether we have an official position.
So yes, I am a board member. As far as an official position, I would have to defer to the executive committee as far as that part is concerned. And you can let me know whether or not you want me to offer a personal position, because I do have a personal position on it.
Sure, why don't you give it a try?
Go ahead. Okay, great. So I have been fortunate enough, as part of our volunteer education at Friends, to have had lectures provided to us by the Bighorn Sheep Institute. And based on those lectures, I realized the importance of having that fencing installed. And in the areas that the fencing was first installed, for instance, over in Rancho Mirage, there is not a single ram that has wandered down and been hit in traffic. There's not a single bighorn sheep that has been lost over in that area since that fence was installed, which is probably close to 10 years ago now, right, Colin?
At least.
Okay. Unfortunately, one of the things that was happening in La Quinta, because there was no fencing in certain areas, is that even though the peninsular bighorn sheep prefer to eat things like sweet bush, bevia, they will wander down onto golf courses, and you can have the most ecologically best practices as far as golf courses are concerned, and yet there's still some chemicals that are going to have to be applied to the grasses, and some of those chemicals are going to end up in the water that's on a golf course. And unfortunately, the peninsular bighorn sheep, if there isn't fencing there, they'll come down to those areas, they'll graze on the grass, and they'll drink the water, and they become ill and die. The other thing that's happened is that where the Coachella Canal is, that there are ewes that have fallen in there. Lambs that have fallen in there and drowned, which is very, very sad. You know, we don't want those types of things happening. So one of the things, fortunately, that did happen in La Quinta is that there was temporary fencing that was put up along Silver Rock Golf Course. And I, for one, I've been over to Silver Rock. It's one of my favorite places to go to. I find myself looking up at the mountains because I'm trying to see if I can find some peninsular bighorn sheep. And so to me, the fencing is very inobtrusive. I have to remind myself that there's fencing that's there, otherwise that I don't see it. So I'm hoping that people in other areas will come take a look at that and realize that the best solution is to put fencing up in those areas so that the peninsular bighorn sheep stay in their habitat. That's what's healthiest for them, and that's where they're happiest. So again, personal opinion.
Thank you for answering that. Let's see, I had another question about a good place to hike right now where we can do social distancing or social spacing.
Oh my gosh.
Recommendations, I can give you a few as well.
Oh my gosh, yes. All over the Coachella Valley. That's one of the things that's so wonderful about here is that we have so much open space. And I'm so thankful for people like Buford Kreitz, who is one of our board members, who back in the 1980s realized the importance of protecting these natural lands. So there are so many places to go. Some of my favorite places, I happen to live in La Quinta, and so many of my favorite places are in La Quinta. So Bear Creek Oasis Trail is really interesting, especially when you go down. The actual trail is down in the wash. So go in that area. You'll probably find more people who like to visit in that area. You may want to bring a face mask along, so that when you are in a situation that you can't maintain your 6 feet distancing, that you can put your mask up for that period of time. Otherwise, head over to the Santa Rosa Wilderness, head over to Coral Mountain, head over to Martinez Rock Slide or Fish Traps off of Avenue 66 and Jackson. You know, we're so fortunate to have so much open space here that there's many areas that you can go into, and you may be the only 2 people. Always hike with another person, so the only 2 people who are in that area. Every once in a while, maybe 1 or 2 people will come by you on horseback, but that's one of the things that's very special about living in the Coachella Valley.
Yeah, and I would add to that, since it's getting warm, and maybe some of those trails are starting to be pretty difficult to hike in during the middle of the day. If you hike in the low desert, in that lower Sonoran life zone, you want to hike early or late usually. And then if you're looking for places to hike up the mountain a little bit, the Cactus Spring Trail is a good option that is pretty social distancing friendly. It's a nice wide trail for most of the way. And from the same place, the Cactus Spring Trail starts at the same place as the Sawmill Trail, which is a more difficult trail. It kind of goes switchbacks up the mountain more directly, but that's a very wide trail, and there's lots of room for social distancing on that trail.
And if you want to read an excellent article about the Cactus Spring Trail, Colin happened to write an article for Palm Springs Life. Am I saying it correctly, Colin? An
That's
excellent
a
article.
personal plug, though. You don't need to.
Colin, I think it's an excellent article. So I would suggest that people go online and read that. He did an excellent job on it.
Thanks. Any other questions? I think I got them all. Scroll through the list here and check the Facebook feed. See if there are any questions there.
I don't think so.
Oh, there was one more question about climate change and noticeable shifts in species and zones moving up as temperature rises. Yes, so it's preliminary, but we've been working, as Elizabeth mentioned, we've been working with our volunteers and staff, and working with staff at the University of California, Riverside, to study the potential movement of species in the National Monument, in the Santa Rosa and San Jacinto Mountains National Monument. And what we're so far finding, or what we think we're seeing, we're still gathering data to the point where we have like a statistically significant effect, is that the Coachella Valley, within the Coachella Valley, there's a range of temperatures and rainfall. So Palm Springs is wetter and cooler, and La Quinta is drier and warmer. And on those drier and warmer parts of the monument, plants are at lower elevations are doing poorly, or more poorly, or the plants that we're looking at anyway. And at higher elevations in the same area, they're doing well, or there's been no change basically in the last few years of warming. And in Palm Springs, there's not much shift at all noticeable so far. So there seems to be sort of a localized effect so far in the farther east mountains of things moving up the mountains. And I had one more question, I think then we'll wrap it up, is are we planning future webinars? And yes, we are. We just posted our next webinar, which will be at the same time next week in the same place. Or we'll send you a new link, but same Zoom webinar on, it's called The Hidden Desert. And we'll be looking at, I'll be giving the presentation, and it's about some of the data and nice pictures of amazing animals that we're seeing on our remote sensing trail cameras spread out throughout the desert. So that's a really fun one to see, and I encourage you all to sign up for it when the link goes out. Thank you again, Elizabeth, for your wonderful presentation, and you all for for joining us. Elizabeth, do you have any closing words you'd like to say?
Hopefully we'll see a bobcat next week on those pictures.
I can guarantee we will see a bobcat next week on those pictures. Yes, and more. And bigger cats too.
Mountain lions?
They've been pretty active.
Maybe.
Oh, okay. And you know what? We should let people know that this webinar sold out very quickly. And so we'll encourage people to go online. As soon as we finish your call, and I'm going online to register.
Right. And just like this webinar will be streaming on Facebook Live at the same time if you don't get into the webinar, and posting the recording afterwards. Oh, I'm gonna unmute everybody briefly, so at the end of the presentation. So if anybody wants to say thank you to Elizabeth, go right ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well done.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Awesome.
Great, thank you for presentation.
Irmala, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to see
Hi,
you.
Elizabeth. I wanted to see her. Hi,
Thank
Colin.
you.
Hi, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you. It was great. Really well done.
Thank you.
There is some words together. Finish stuff.
All right, thanks everybody. Stay well.
Yeah.
Next week.
Thank
Sure,
you.
exactly.
Bye.